Today is April 4th, 2026, and I just woke up from a very detailed dream of a couple of sleeper cell attacks. And in this dream, at least one or two of these plots were really a sleeper cell, but one for sure was not, and the other one I think probably was a sleeper cell, but it wasn't clear. It could have also been this other type of attack, which it could have detailed 3 different types of attacks. So one is sleeper cell, which is someone who's been previously trained and sent in advance on a mission. The other type is like a jihad response, right? So where, someone is incited to do something through an online group or, jihad related connection where they're instructed to take action or do something. And then the third type is a copycat, right? And so that is where, for example, in the news they've been saying that be careful, there's heightened risk of bombings on Christian places of worship this weekend, and someone hears that and then they decide to go and target a Christian place of worship because they've heard it in the news. And so that's a copycat, what I would call a copycat type incident. In this dream, it seemed that there was potentially all 3 types going on. And this attack was, for sake of the dream, it was all one place, but in hindsight, it was just so that the dream was condensed, but it was in reality 3 different sites where these bombings were, where these targeted attacks were taking place. The first was a banquet dance hall, and the person in that banquet hall had a mask on, and they were part of a network, and they were planning to do something very evil. And I sensed it, I knew it, and I left. I didn't know what they were doing, but I sensed the evil. And I went out to investigate, to see, because I saw something suspicious outside as well. When I went outside, came around the building, and that's where in the dream it was all one big hotel. But now being awakened in hindsight, that's why I'm saying that it was, for the sake of the dream, it was all one big hotel. So when I went outside to investigate, I found something else suspicious. And so I followed that rabbit trail, which ended up being a separate, the makings of a separate attack. And this was, I guess, what I would potentially call the copycat attack, because it involved a younger boy as well, because he was supposed to helped create a signal distraction. He was maybe 13, and he just wasn't trained for this. He was messy and complaining and not even really clear about what the plan was, and he was worried about getting in trouble by his mom, and so he was creating a bit of a ruckus, and I was quite distracted by that. And so I was following him in the dream because it was so obvious to me that he was part of some plot. And I followed him around, and then we were at the front of this hotel, and I ran in to tell them to call the police because, it was clear that that boy was connected to someone else that was going to be doing something to cause harm. And I ran in and I said, they're planning some Islamic attack here. And then when I looked at the man at the front desk, and then even absent that, I realized I didn't have the official proof to say it was Islamic. But I said, maybe not Islamic, but they're planning something here to hurt people, and it's really suspicious. We have to call the police. And the man at the front desk was like, he looked maybe Sri Lankan, and I assumed maybe he was Muslim, but I didn't know for sure. And of course, people convert all the time. But the young boy who was, making a scene outside, he was of Middle Eastern descent. And then the man from the front desk really blew me off, and he said, no, we already know. Like it's already being handled, essentially. And I was kind of distraught by that. That I didn't know what to do. If he's saying it's being addressed, he just seemed to kind of shrug it off. But he did look at me and say, like, we're already aware of it, essentially. And so I went outside. The little boy was shaking up. At first I didn't know what it was, but it ended up being some kind of I thought it might have been a bomb, so I got away from him a ways. And then I realized it was some makeshift smoker. It wasn't a can, but it created smoke and a distraction. And he was still whining and fussing and kind of crying. He didn't want to be involved in this at this point and was regretting getting caught up in this and didn't know what to do. I think because I don't know, maybe it was a older family member or what, but he was just going forward with what he was instructed or agreed to do. And so when smoke started coming out of it, then I realized that he was involved with something bigger. And so I looked around, and there was this man in I think it was a blue full-on Monsters, Inc. costume, and he was putting the last piece on, which was the part that goes over his head. And he was in the water, so in the distance off in the back of the hotel, there was a body of water, and he was in the shallow part, but he was getting in the water, and he was putting on the last piece of the costume, which was the head of this. It was almost like a Monsters, Inc. mascot costume. And I ran back into the hotel to warn them, and all of a sudden this huge bomb went off. And next thing you know, like, the police were there. There were bodies, like, it was horrible. And I started screaming at the guy at the front desk, and I'm like, you said that they were taking care of it. You knew. And then he started crying. And I was like, what's your name? Give me your name. And he first gave me maybe his name and his, like, his birth name. So it was like a different kind of a name, like an Indian name. And I remember I wrote it down. It was like, I'm seeing it on the paper right now. It was, and I also see his face. I remember what he looked like. He, almost like he's a real person in real life. It was something Moon, Nays Moon, Nays Moon, or something like that. And then when I moved on the paper, I wanted the name too off his badge. His hotel badge said Jay. And then he also had like a third part to his name. And then he broke down, not sobbing, but kind of crying. And I think too it may have been maybe shame and guilt, but I don't know how much of it was that he was caught, like, and then he confessed. And he said, yeah, well, they called me and they said that they were doing this and to be quiet about it, and that they would give some money, I think he said, and also that they would give this little hotel like a good review or something. And I was so angry then in the dream, and I started yelling, and I was screaming at all the people who saw something suspicious but didn't say anything, or who knew and saw the red flags and didn't speak up, or who saw what was happening but just didn't care. And I was screaming at everyone, and I was saying, God judges the heart. He's judging your heart. Each and every one of you, it's your heart. And he knows. You can say what you want right now and do and make it appear whatever you want. But it's your heart. He sees your heart. And he is judge. He's coming to judge. And he's essentially, nothing is going unseen. Everything is seen. And my voice was hoarse and like my throat, my tongue. And when I woke up, my throat and my tongue, and my tongue feels swollen, and my throat, is dry and hoarse. And a lot of people died there.